Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. I thought I'd do a fun little project and put together a retro system with these parts. I've been meaning to do it for quite a while now. I wanted to build something, a retro system from the late 90s, something that could, be fun to play the original Quake 3, Quake 2, the original Half-Life, Unreal Tournament, Serious Sam, or Kingpin Life of Crime, those types of games, Soldier of Fortune. So yeah, I'm going to be putting together this system. I'm going to go over these components that I have picked out and show you another retro build that I've been using for a little while now. So anyways, let's get started with these parts. I'm going to be using for the motherboard. This is an Asus P2B board using the pretty famous and highly reliable Intel BX440 chipset. So this chipset supports front side bus speeds of 66, 100, and unofficially 133. It's slot 1, so it takes those old cartridges you saw, you've seen, maybe not. Pentium 2, Pentium 3, and the Celerons. I believe, I'm not sure if this motherboard's compatible, but you could also get an adapter that could then use the the socket chips, the more newer Pentium 3s. So ATX connector, 3 SDRAM DIMM slots. This is PC66, PC100. You might be able to use 133, but it would just downclock to 100. Unless you're overclocking, and then you might be able to take advantage of the 133 speeds. For hard drive, speeds are, I believe this motherboard only supports UDMA or Ultra 33 megabytes per second, so no crazy fast speeds there. Standard CMOS battery, no onboard sound, no onboard Ethernet, pretty basic. 3 ISA slots for PCI and AGP. I believe this is AGP 2 times or 1. This might be 2. But anyways, this is one of the original AGP. For the ports, we have PS2 keyboard and mouse, USB 1.0, forget 2.0 or 3.0, 1.0. 2 serial port connectors, good back in the day for modems and, I don't know, various other devices. Got the trusty parallel port, or serial port, but generally used for printers. And that is basically it. So, oh, one cool feature, or not feature, but even from this board being from around 1998, it's got 3 fan headers. So you got a case fan there, a CPU fan header there, 3-pin, no PWM, and you got a third one over here. So for the CPU, you're going to be going with a Intel Pentium 2. This is a 350. So it was one of the first CPUs to run off Intel's 100 megahertz front side bus, and it has 512 kilobyte of L2 cache. No L3 cache on these guys. So CPU on the cartridge, you got the CPU that's on the middle of the cartridge, and then you have 256 kilobyte chip on this side, and the other 256 kilobyte on this side. So that's how it was divided up. Because the cache is external to the actual CPU die, it runs at half the speed on these ones. Later, the first Pentium 3s also were configured the same way, but then the later Pentium 3s actually had, which were copper mined, they had they only had 256 kilobyte of L2 cache, but it was actually on the die and on the chip itself. So it was a heck of a lot faster because it ran at the full speed, but it was only half. So, but it was still faster. For memory, we are going to be using a 128 megabyte, 100 megahertz SDRAM chip, CL2. So your DDR4, DDR4 kits with your CL14, 16, This has all of that beat, CL2. Sound card, gonna go with the original Sound Blaster Live. Pretty nice card. Has the EAX support. Though that wasn't, a lot of games didn't have that built into the beginning of the 2000s. But overall, it's a pretty nice card, the CT4830. I don't know if this is 5.1, but anyways, yeah, you get digital out, mic, there's your line out, and I don't know which one this is. And then, like a lot of the Creative Lab sound cards, this has the joystick game port. So yeah, not bad. For Ethernet, going to be going with a Intel PCI 10100 card. So yeah, 10 or 100 megabits per second. Nothing crazy, but and I'm not obviously using this system to get on the web, but the nice thing about having Ethernet cards in these retro systems is that, so I run a Raspberry Pi, I run an FTP on a Raspberry Pi, and what I do is from my main systems, my regular everyday systems, I can just copy files I need. So instead of having to use CD-ROMs or floppy drives, you can just copy all the files you need, drivers, games, you know, copy everything you need to the FTP, and then can download it straight to the system. And even though it's 10100, it's still pretty fast. And then for the star of the show, for the GPU, going to be using a 3DFX. That's right, 3DFX. This is a Voodoo 3 2000. So this was a pretty popular brand and pretty popular card back in the late 90s. This is AGP, and this was the lower end one. So they had the 2000, the 3000. I actually had the 3000 myself. And then there was a 3500 that had, I believe, TV out. And maybe also had a TV or TV tuner built in. Anyways, so the difference wasn't much. This 2000 variant had core clock of 143 megahertz. Yeah, 143 megahertz, no gigahertz here. The 3000 had core clock of 166 megahertz, and then the 3500 had 183 megahertz core clock. You could overclock these by 20 megahertz, which was pretty easy to do back then with like Riva Tuner. But with these small heat sinks, these things already ran red hot. So, and they didn't come with a fan. And even though they could take the temps, most people had like slot fan coolers parked beside these guys to keep them a little cooler. This is, since it's 3DFX, you can play all the 3DFX Glide games. Their Glide API was pretty popular back then, although towards the end of the 90s and the early 2000s, it was almost faded out. Like the Glide, I think, API, the 3DFX Glide was pretty popular with the Voodoo 1s and 2s, but with the 3s, it was sort of dying out. A lot of games still supported it, but OpenGL was pretty much taken over. For the hard drive, I'm going to be going with a Western Digital 20 gig. 20 gig is more than enough. Yeah, this drive has a manufacturing date of 2001. Yeah, 20 gigs, so that'll be more than enough. And I actually believe this is a brand new 20 gig I got off eBay a while back. It's pretty quiet, and yeah, it'll be more than enough. So for the case, I'm going to be using this ATX case. It's pretty new. Actually, I think it's an Antec case. It's I already put in here black floppy drive. Couldn't find a matching CD-ROM drive, but I stuck a, I think this is a 4x DVD drive, and then this is a 16x or 12x LG CD burner. And then because the like I was showing the CPU, most of the Intel CPUs, the Pentium 2s and 3s, they all, I don't know if they required it, but most of them had a fan on there. So what I'm going to do is, and I'd like some extra cooling for the Voodoo 3. So I'm just gonna mount a 120mm case fan here, or maybe even 2 of them, and that's to be sufficient to blow all the cool air I need onto the CPU and the Voodoo 3. So the other retro system that I have built that I've been using for a little while is a 386. Yeah, I've got this one decked out with stickers already. DEF CON 27. It's a hacker conference I went to in 2019. It's got a 52 times CD-ROM drive, which definitely didn't exist back in 1992, 93 when these parts would have been in use. But you don't want to be using 2 times, 4 times CD-ROM drives these days because, anyways, they're just unreliable. And besides these newer drives, what's nice about them is that they work perfectly fine in these systems, but they're also capable of reading burnt CDs. So a lot of if you had a 8 times or 4 times CD drive in here, a lot of times they have issues reading CDs that have been burnt on modern systems. So if I burnt a game that I want to put on here, you'd have an issue if you had a actual time period correct CD-ROM drive or whatever in here. It wouldn't be able to read it. So I do have a 1.44 megabyte floppy drive, though I don't use floppies that much anymore because I have 3 or 4 floppy drives. Like I have one in this system, which I'll be using for the Pentium 2, but it's the disks that are really unreliable these days. It's hard to buy floppies. If you can, they're really expensive, and they're just prone to failure or bad sectors on the track. It's a nightmare. I've had so many go bad. So what I ended up doing is getting this off Amazon. They're about $30. I got this sometime last year. I think they're called GoTech, if you're ever looking for one. That's who makes them, but there's probably other companies. So basically, it just takes a USB drive. You can use a 2, 4, 8, 16 gig, and you get the software that comes with the drive, and it partitions the USB key into 100 or even 1,000 1.44 megabyte partitions. And so then you use the software to copy floppy images on a modern system to the USB key, those partitions. And then you can cycle through them. It's got a mini display here, and it's got the 2 buttons. One does, I think, single movements. The other one can move 10 at a time. There is a mod you can do for this system. You can upgrade this display to an OLED, and you can swap this out with a little bit of drilling, I think, to get a wheel, which makes cycling through them a lot faster, especially if you have 1,000 partitions. Even moving 10 at a time is pretty cumbersome, but that's something I might do. Anyways, so this 386, it is using, I have an original Sound Blaster 16 in here. This is the CT1740, and it's cool. It's got the volume adjuster wheel right on the back there. Game port. This is a pretty cool card for all those original, early 1990 games that could take advantage of the Sound Blaster 16. For Ethernet, because like I said, I run the FTP on my Raspberry Pi. This computer has DOS 5.0 on it. I haven't put Windows 3.11 on here. Right now, DOS 5 is perfectly fine. But what's nice about having the Ethernet, again, there's this guy, I forget his name, but he made this, you can look it up. It's called Mini TCP IP Utilities. And it's a bunch of utilities that's very small in size, a couple megabytes, but it gives you Telnet, SSH, FTP. You get all your, your ping, a whole bunch of TCP utilities. And it's so handy because you can FTP into the Raspberry Pi from this 386 and DOS 5.0, and I can download all the drivers I need. I can download all the software I need. I don't have to go even through I rarely use even the USB floppy because it's so handy just to throw things on FTP. And this is only 10 megabits per second, but it does the job. It's, you know, we're dealing with file sizes that are megabytes in size, so it's nothing. For the VGA card, I'm using a Cirrus Logic 5429, I believe. It's got 1 megabyte, 2 512 kilobyte chips there. It's VGA, I believe, Super VGA as well. It can do 16-bit color at 800 by 600, and I think 256 color at 1024 by 768. But again, I'm using this system for old DOS games. Right now I'm playing the original Tex Murphy Mean Streets that I think came out in like 89 or 1990, which that game's pretty awesome if you ever get a chance to play it, because I don't have speakers hooked up to the system, but it actually, the game uses the internal computer speaker. It doesn't even go through the Sound Blaster card, but it uses the internal speaker, and they had some voice technology. I'll have to do a separate video on this computer, but they have some voice technology, and for a game that came out in 89 or 90, like they have digitized voices talking through the internal speaker. So it's a pretty cool game. For memory, oh, well, actually, let me show this. This is the I/O card. So on 386 and 46s, if you're not already familiar, they have you had to use an I/O card on most of the boards, external I/O card. So all your COM ports and your floppy, well, CD-ROM, and your hard drive, they would all hook up to this I/O card, which then plugs into an ISA slot. This obviously only has ISA slots, 16-bit, a couple 8-bit, you can see there, but most of them are 16-bit ISA slots. So you plug everything into the I/O card, including the COM ports that are, I think, on here already, and then it plugs into the ISA slot. So it's extremely slow, but it does the job. But back in the day, I don't know, it was perfectly fine. I don't think no one knew different. We didn't have SATA or anything else, no crazy speeds to compare it with anyways. So for the hard drive, I am using a CF card. So this is a 256 megabyte CF card. You know, the hard drives for these systems are pretty rare. Because this is a 386, you don't really want to, I don't think it'll support more than a 200 meg, 300 meg hard drive. You might be able to get a 500 meg working, but old hard drives of that size are extremely unreliable, and it's just not worth the issues. Most of them have a loud whine, sound like an airplane's taken off, and if you do get a working one, they're really prone to failure, especially with their age now. So you're far better off just using a CF card. It won't fail on you. And like these ones, and they are the industrial grade, so they'll take a real beating with reads and writes, and you're not exactly going to kill it just reading megabytes of data from a 386 anyways. For memory, you got, I don't know how well this is showing, 8 megabyte of 30-pin SIM-RAM, not EDO. Original SIM 30-pin. Don't even think 386 supported 72-pin EDO until I don't even know if 46 was the beginning CPU chips that supported 72-pin and EDO. Anyways, for the star of the show, I don't know if this is going to show. Let me see if I can get a shot here. So there we have our AMD 386 DX 40 megahertz, Windows compatible. AMD had to put that on there. Yeah, Windows compatible for Windows 3.11 since the CPU came out in 92. But I don't know if I plan on putting that in here anyways. I do have a fan in here, but yeah, it's not hooked up. You don't exactly need a fan to cool this system. I mean, you see even the CPU doesn't even have even a heatsink on it, I think that CPU, yeah, well, it runs at 40 megahertz. Doesn't need anything to cool it down. I have this adapter here because this is a 250 watt ATX power supply. So I had to get an adapter to convert it from ATX to the standard AT power, which is two, I believe it's 6-pin, two 6-pin plugs there. Yeah, and then the CMOS battery is one of those old barrel connectors that are prone to leaking, but I don't think this one has that issue. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So this really fun system to use. But anyways, yeah, this should be a fun project, getting these parts going again. Pentium 2 and yeah, Voodoo 3. The keyboard I'm going to be using is pretty awesome. So I'm going to be using a, doesn't show it here anyways. This is one of those famous Keytronic keyboards. I think sometime last year I picked this up off eBay. Very nice keyboard. I remember using these ones in high school. Like just amazing tactile key feedback. This isn't the IBM. These aren't mechanical switches, but they might as well be because these things are just listen to that. Anyways, yeah. So I'll probably do another video where I actually put these parts together. I'll probably have that coming up within a day, and I will show in the same video the process of installing Windows 98 and getting some games running on them, and then I'll do a second video of my 386. Anyways, thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.